Welcome to Life Planning 101, brought to you by Kennedy Financial Services of Eastland. Tune in every Monday morning at 8:30 on KATX and again on Saturday morning at 9 a.m. on KATX and KWBY as Angela Robinson joins Stace Gaddy to share important financial information to help you live life on purpose, insurance, investments, estate and tax planning, and much more. All covered now on Life Planning 101.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Life Planning 101. I'm Stace Gaddy. As the nice announcer man said, along with Angela Robinson from Kennedy Financial Services, our guest and expert, and we're just going to spend the entire half hour talking about football.
Good morning. Exciting things coming up with football. Should be a wonderful Super Bowl this year, so that's exciting. But we've got some wonderful information today. In addition to that, we are going to have a guest speaker in the second half of the show, or the second middle part of the show, so you don't want to miss him. He's going to be calling in from Overland Park, Kansas this morning. So long distance. I'll talk a little bit about him before the break. We are also going to have, of course, our trivia, and we're going to be giving away a free box of donuts again. And I know everybody loves those warm, gooey donuts, so you don't want to miss that. And it is your choice, by the way. So make sure you listen particularly attention to all the statistics today, because we're going to be going off of something there. But we're going to be talking about an epidemic in our country, and it is really something that's not talked about a lot because I think people fear it. Number one, I think sometimes they think, oh, it'll never happen to me, and I think sometimes they don't want to talk about it because it's disastrous for their family and they don't know how to get it under control, and that is the financial impact of caregiving.
Okay.
And I know, we're all very well aware that we have an aging population in the United States of America, and it's becoming more so every day. In fact, I first did an article on this back in 2008, and at that time there was a statistic from caregivers.org that talked about 52 million caregivers in our country were providing care to people over the age of 18. And that is about 1 in every 5 households. Okay, that number has grown where today that 29% of people are being cared for by unpaid caregivers alone. 29% of the American population. Isn't that crazy? Or the elderly. So I want you to think about how much of a difference that actually is. And, the question I have for you is, will one of your family members need care in the future? And a lot of us don't think about that. But I was actually a great conference last week. I learned a lot out in Florida, and it was with a bunch of insurance people. And one of the things that was talked about was a gentleman, and he was talking about his mother, and he was telling her, Mom, you need to have this long-term care policy. We're going to buy this long-term care policy. She said, in no way or fashion am I going to buy that long-term care policy. I don't need it. And he said, well, okay, which one of your 5 daughter-in-laws are you going to go to live with?
There you go.
And that's really your options. A lot of people think, oh, well, I'll just shoot myself in the head, or I'll take care of my own problem. In fact, I've heard that from my own in-laws. So we hear that from a lot of people. But, what if it's too late to even know that you have an issue? I mean, do you want to be putting that burden on your children and your grandchildren? And I think that's the big issue today is that we're just discovering this as a real big problem. When we were talking 15, 20 years ago, it wasn't, because life expectancy wasn't there, right?
Right.
But today it is. In fact, over 70% of the population over 65 will need long-term care. That's a stat from Prudential. And Prudential is in the business of long-term care. Another thing about that is I found this so interesting. A lot of people say, well, if I need it, it won't be for very long. Okay. Yes, 17% of those people will only need it for less than a year. But get this, there's more people that will need it over 5 years than there are that need it less than 1 year. Isn't that crazy?
That is.
5 years of care.
It's expensive.
It's extremely expensive. In fact, going back to caregivers.org, they said in America, caregivers on average spend an average of 4.5 years delivering care. 4.5 years. And
average.
Yeah, average. And they're usually unpaid, right? Because it's usually a daughter, a sister, a granddaughter, and I hate to use all these women.
Grandson.
Sometimes, it's Stacey's sitting here pointing to me. I'm a male, and that is true. And I think, Stace, you're one of a kind, because most men say, well, I'll never be in that position. But what they don't realize is their wife will be, or their daughter will be. And, and this is twofold. Because number one, you got to think about yourself, the potential for you to be in this position, and what kind of situation do you want to put your kids or grandkids in. But also, how are you going to take care of those elderly parents or your adult children in some situations, and some at the same time? We're seeing that happen a lot. We call it the sandwich generation. So we're going to get back into this. I'm actually going to give you some things that you really need to get the facts on and put in order to be able to plan for this type of scenario, because it's not a if, it's a when for your family. But when we come back, we've got our guest speaker. You don't want to miss him. We've got a special guest. It's going to be talking on the markets.
You're listening to Life Planning 101. We're back right after this. A gigantic round of Good Morning Texas applause for all of our wonderful, wonderful sponsors. You're listening to Life Planning 101. I'm Stace Gaddy. Angela Robinson, our usual expert and guest. And we have a special guest this segment, ma'am.
That is right, and I am really excited to have him on the show with us. As everybody knows, listens to our show regularly, my brother comes on once a month, and he is what's called a CFA. He's got a designation, and he is the one in our office that is constantly managing money, watching the markets, seeing what's going on, and analyzing things. And that designation, I just want to talk a little bit about it for just a second, because our special guest today holds that designation as well. And it is the elite of the elite in the financial world. It actually takes about 3 years if you pass the first time around each of those tests. And it's not a graded test. They only take the top average. And I don't even remember what that top piece is. It's like the top 30% that actually pass the test. So, it's a really esteemed designation on analytics and finances and economics and what's actually happening in our environment. So we're really happy to have on the phone with us a gentleman out of Overland Park, Kansas. He's with our broker-dealer, VSR, and he is so good at what he does that they brought him on to be able to help over 300 reps and what's going on with the markets on a consistent basis. And he actually builds out portfolios that many of these reps use out of these offices. So with that, Peter Hughes, we're so happy to have you on the line with us today. Thank you for being here, and thank you for sharing your commentary on what's going on today in the markets. And I know you had some things you wanted to talk about with where we're at in relation to where we were just a few years ago. So again, thanks for coming on, Peter.
Yeah, Angela, I really appreciate the chance to be here and share some of the things that I've been seeing in the markets. I think probably everybody's concerned about the volatility that we've seen in the U.S. market, and actually, if you're aware, we've seen even more volatility in international markets. A couple of interesting statistics. Over 50% of stocks in the S&P 500 are actually down more than 20% from their 52-week high. So if you look at individual stocks, over half the stocks in the index are in a bear market. Another interesting statistic is that 35 of the biggest 45 country indices are down 20% or more. So around the world, there's a lot of turmoil, a lot of stocks down. And I think the big question for U.S. investors is just, what's going to happen here? Did we hit a bottom last week, or are we going back down? And obviously, in the short term, we never are able to answer that question. But I think the paradigm that you should think about with the market right now is the U.S. likely to go into a recession? Because typically, serious bear markets where the index falls 20, 30, 40%, those types of declines are almost always accompanied by recessions. And the U.S. is not in a recession yet, and the question is, are we moving towards one? If we are not, if it turns out that we avoid recession, then probably I would guess that we're actually pretty near the low, or it could temporarily go lower, but the odds of a real serious decline from here aren't very high. I think there's a lot of reason to hope that we are going to avoid a recession. A couple of reasons. If you look at the reasons why the U.S. market is down right now, there's two things in particular that come to mind. One is slowdown in China, which is certainly affecting the rest of the world and the emerging markets. But if you look behind the numbers, what you see is that only about 1% of U.S. GDP relates to exports to China. So if the Chinese economy is slowing and demand there is falling, that's not going to impact the U.S. that much, at least on a direct basis, because only about 1% of our GDP is being exported to China. So if Chinese demand falls, say, 10 or 20%, that shouldn't have that big a consequence on the U.S. economy. The other big thing that's affecting the markets right now, obviously, is lower oil prices, which has a huge detrimental impact on certain parts of the U.S. But again, if you look behind the numbers, only about 6% of the S&P 500 is accounted for with energy stocks. Now, if you go back a year or 2 years, that was more like 8 or 9%. But currently, only about 6% of the S&P 500 is energy stocks. The other 94% of the index really are beneficiaries of lower energy costs, or at least it's a neutral factor. So the idea that lower oil prices by themselves are going to drag the whole U.S. economy into recession seems unlikely. Now, all that having been said, obviously there's strains that are going on in our economy. Industrial production is down a couple of percentage points from where it was. So there's room for concern. We certainly could go into recession, but I think there's still substantial hope that we will avoid it. One other question that I get asked a lot, which I think is just worth commenting on, is are we at risk of going into something like what happened 7 years ago? Could this become another 2008, 2009? And I think it's worth just mentioning that there's a one fundamental difference between what's going on now and what happened then, and that is that the 2008 crisis centered on the banking system, all the bad loans from ultra-high real estate prices and bad mortgages and things like that. So that problem struck at our financial system's core, the banking system. What's going on now with China, with the oil sector, that is not striking at the core of the economy. And frankly, our banking system is much better capitalized, and in many ways, banks have gotten too conservative in how they loan money. So the idea that the financial sector is going to be dragged down seriously the way that it was a few years ago, I think that likelihood is remote. And so even if the U.S. does go into a recession and the markets go lower, the odds of anything like what we experienced a few years ago, I think, are very low. That was probably a once-in-a-generation type of situation. So, there's a lot to be concerned about, and markets are down a little bit today again. But I'm actually relatively optimistic that the lows are not going to be too low in this correction. So
I know that sounds like probably a lot of relief to our listeners today, is just hearing a little bit of confidence. I know Aaron's been imposing that confidence on him for the last couple of months. He said we're going to go through some rocky times, but we are bullish. We think it's a great time to be buying into the market, and because there is potential for growth in our country, because we've really never had a lot of these corporations put cash back in there. So would you agree with that, Peter?
I would agree, and I think money that's put into the stock market, by nature, that should be relatively long-term money. And if you're investing for the long term, prices are better now than they were a year ago or 2 years ago. And so this is a good time to be a buyer if you've got a long-term orientation. Yeah.
Well, thank you, Peter. We appreciate it. I hate to cut you off. We're on a time here. I get looked at with dirty looks across the table if I don't keep up with things. But we really appreciate you being on the show this morning and adding so much value for our listeners. And we hope to have you back at some future point. And just again, hope you have a wonderful week, and God bless you.
Great to be here. Thank you. Bye.
There he is. No dirty looks. No dirty looks, Angela Robinson. Never. You will never get a dirty look. Peter Hughes, everyone, special guest this morning. We really do appreciate it. However, we do have to watch the clock. And we need to check in with our sponsors.
I knew it.
Yes. Just great, though, to have, again, that level of information, including your brother.
Absolutely.
And it's free, folks. Absolutely free. I hope you understand what you're getting. All right, let's take a quick break. We'll be right back with more Life Planning 101. Welcome back in, folks, to Life Planning 101, our final segment together this morning. I'm Stace Gaddy. If you're just joining us, as always, our guest and expert, Angela Robinson from Kennedy Financial Services right here in Eastland. Our topic today, the financial impact of caregiving, and, of course, sandwiched in between there, some great market information.
Yeah, that's right. We did have a great segment by Peter Hughes, a CFA out of Overland Park, Kansas, so that was wonderful. If you missed it, you can always go back and hear our recordings And we'd love for you to do that. So let's get back, though, to the financial impact of caregiving. And I want to bring a point across, because I think a lot of people, we've been in a society and we have a customary role in this society as Americans to take care of our elders. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Okay. So I want to change your way of thinking for a minute, because trust me, I love my parents and I love my grandparents. I have 2 grandmothers that are both in care right now, and there's nothing in the world that I want more than for them to be taken care of. But I want you to think about our country and the way that it's actually changing. And the fact is that we have over 70 million Americans that are estimated to be in retirement by 2030. And you're not going to be able to obtain the same government benefits that your parents are now, that they're obtaining now, or your grandparents are now. And what that's going to do is it's going to place a much larger burden on your own children and bringing them into this same financial caregiving club, that they're going to have to take care of you. So I want you to think about something. It is, if you've ever sat on a plane and the stewardess gets up and she starts talking about all the safety rules, right? And now it's on a TV. But they tell you, if you have a child sitting next to you and the oxygen masks fall down, who do you put the oxygen mask on first? Yourself, right? And as any parent would do, I would want to help my child. That would be my instinct, right? It's what we have as instincts. But if you don't take care of yourself first, you're going to end up in a world of hurt. And the same applies here, because I think a lot of people don't realize that, let's say that you go out of work for 1 year to take care of your mom or your grandmother that's in care. And let's say that you save 10% a year for your retirement. So if you don't work 1 year, you ultimately just sacrifice 10 years of savings. 10 years of savings. Isn't that crazy?
It's scary.
It is scary. And a lot of people don't realize that. So what I want you to fast forward and think about it and say, oh, well, I'll just have to work forever. A lot of people have that mindset. Yes, you may. But let's fast forward and put you in the position that your mom is in. Now, who's going to take care of you? Your kids? Are they going to be in the same shape? Are they going to be in better shape or worse shape? Or how's that going to play out? And that's something that we don't often think about. We don't want to think about it, number one. But we don't often think about it because we think about the here and the now. We think about what's going on now. I love my mom, and I am going to take care of her no matter what happens. I'm going to do this because this is what she needs. And that may be true, but there may be other ways to do it. And that's what a lot of people don't realize. They try to go this ship alone and say, I can do it on my own. And what they find out is it causes so much stress, whether it be financial, emotional, physical for themselves. It puts their health down. I think, Stace, you told me of a story yourself about someone that, was able, that the caregiver ended up sick before the person that was actually getting care. And so, that could be huge. But, I want you to think about what are the opportunities that are going to be lost? Your job promotions, higher education for your children. What are the things that are going to be sacrificed through this? And I think that's something that, you need to be able to do. And one of the things that we've always talked about doing is writing a book called Learning How to Say No. And I think it's so powerful because what is our automatic answer when it comes to family?
We say yes.
That's right. That's exactly right. Okay. Does it always need to be yes?
Tough question, Angela Robinson.
Yeah. Have you ever looked back in the rearview mirror and say, man, I should have said no? Yeah. We all have.
Depends on the situation, too, and which family member.
That's right. That's right. We all look at that. So who's going to be your sounding board to go off of? And as life planners, that's what we do. That's how we approach things, is from a perspective that is not emotional. Giving an objective perspective, and giving you all your facts. And then you can make your decisions, because sometimes we don't have that objective perspective when we're emotional. When we've lost, in my situation this year, I lost my grandfather, and my grandmother almost immediately got sick and was put into care. There was no objectiveness. Thank goodness we had already planned everything out, and it just went automatically. It just happened automatically, because had we not, there was so much emotion at that point, there would have been no way to make objective decisions. No way. And so those are things you have to think about. What are your budget? Talking to your parents now about what their situation is and what plans have to be made. Talking to your children now and asking them, hey, we can do this for you, but are you going to help us when we get to retirement? Are you going to help us when we need care? and those types of questions. And oftentimes children are very approachable, but we just have this in our mind that we always have to say yes. And then, talking to someone that has that objectiveness behind them. So I want to approach this today from a little different theory, that I'm not giving you facts and figures. I'm giving you thoughts to ponder on and to really think about your future, your family's future, your children's future, and where they're going to be and what you want all that to look like. And I know it's not something you want to think, not something that's a priority, but let me tell you, it's a priority. It is a big priority. So with that, let's get to our trivia, okay? Let's give away some donuts, because that's always fun to do.
Okay.
All right, so question is what percentage of the elderly are being taken care of today by unpaid caregivers? Said it earlier in the show. I will tell you this, it's over 50%. Oh, you got a big hint there. You got a hint. So email us, lifeplanning@kennedy-financial.com. Also, email us your questions. Email us topics that you want to hear on the show. We'll love to address them. lifeplanning@kennedy-financial.com. The best question we receive every week gets a prize. This week, of course, is in the month of January. Might be the last one. Free gym membership. You don't want to miss it. We do thank you for listening to the show every week. Again, my name is Angela Robinson with Kennedy Financial Services here in the small town of Eastland, Texas. And by the way, God bless America. Let's pray for our country as we go through these elections. What's going on in our country today. Thank you for listening.
Amen to that. Nothing to add to that, folks. Catch you next time for more Life Planning 101.
Thank you for joining us for Life Planning 101, brought to you by Kennedy Financial Services of Eastland. Tune in every Monday morning at 8:30 on KATX and again on Saturday morning at 9 o'clock on KATX and KWBY for more Life Planning 101.
Securities and investment advisory services offered through VSR Financial Services Incorporated, a registered investment advisor and member of FINRA SIPC. Kennedy Financial Services is not owned or controlled by VSR Financial Services Incorporated.